In a prosperous village nestled between rolling hills and golden fields, there lived a woman named Nia. She was the kind of beauty that could make men forget their own names, a woman with skin like polished ebony and eyes that glowed like the evening stars. Every man in the village admired her, but only one was fortunate enough to call her his wife, Kwame. Kwame was not just a man of wealth, he was a man of heart. He had inherited great fortune from his late father, a respected merchant who had built an empire of trade. But unlike many rich men, Kwame was generous and kind, always giving to those in need. He loved Nia with every fiber of his being, and he believed that love was enough to hold a marriage together. But love alone could not tame the heart of a woman who desired more than devotion. A love built on deception. Nia never loved Kwame. She had married him for his wealth, for the security his fortune provided. While he showered her with gifts, golden necklaces, silk garments from distant lands, and grand feasts in their honor, she barely paid him any mind. Her true heart belonged to another. There was a man named Django, a former servant of Kwame's father. He was the opposite of Kwame, wild, daring, and reckless. Though he had no riches to his name, he had something that Nia craved: adventure. The nights she spent in Kwame's luxurious home felt like a prison, but the stolen moments with Django, beneath the cover of darkness, felt like freedom. Their affair was a dangerous dance, a game of secrecy and deception. Nia would tell Kwame she needed time to clear her mind, traveling to faraway villages, only to meet Django in hidden places. She used Kwame's wealth to fund their love, dressing Django in fine garments and taking him to places he could never afford on his own. And Kwame, blinded by love, refused to see the truth. The warning signs. Kwame's best friend, Baba, had seen it coming. He had always warned Kwame about Nia's ways, about her coldness, her distance. "She doesn't love you, Kwame," Baba had said one evening as they sat under the village's great baobab tree. "She loves what you give her." Kwame had only smiled, shaking his head. "Love takes time," he had replied. "One day, she will see my heart." But Baba knew better. He had seen Nia's lingering gazes at Django, the stolen glances that she thought no one noticed. He had heard whispers from the market women who had seen her traveling with a man who was not her husband. And so, Baba made a choice. If Kwame would not open his eyes, then he would force him to see the truth. A dangerous secret. One evening, after returning from a short business trip, Kwame noticed something strange. Nia, who usually greeted him with indifference, was nowhere to be found. He searched their home, checking every room, but she was gone. Her clothes, some of her finest dresses, were missing from the wardrobe. His heart began to pound. For months, a quiet doubt had crept into his mind. The long nights she spent away, the coldness in her voice, the way she would always turn away when he tried to hold her, he had ignored it all. But now, standing in the empty bedroom, he could no longer deny it. Something was wrong. He called her name, but there was no answer. He sent a servant to look for her, but no one had seen her leave. Then, as he turned to leave the room, something on the bedside table caught his eye: a small, folded piece of cloth, embroidered with the initials JK. Django. Kwame's heart turned to ice. For the first time in his life, he realized the truth he had been too afraid to face. His wife had been deceiving him all along. And now, he needed to know how deep the betrayal went. Kwame stood frozen, staring at the embroidered cloth in his trembling hand. JK, Django's initials. It was the confirmation of a suspicion he had buried deep in his heart for far too long. His mind raced, memories flashing before him: Nia's coldness, her unexplained absences, the whispers in the village. Rage and heartbreak boiled within him. He had given Nia everything: his wealth, his devotion, his trust. And yet, she had betrayed him in the worst possible way. With shaking hands, he placed the cloth back on the table. He needed to find her. He needed the truth. A painful truth revealed. Kwame wasted no time. He summoned his most trusted servant, Kojo, and sent him to ask around the village. Meanwhile, he went to see Boba, his closest friend, the only one who had ever dared to speak the truth about Nia. Boba took one look at Kwame's face and knew something had happened. "You were right," Kwame said, his voice hollow. "She has been lying to me." Boba sighed deeply, placing a reassuring hand on Kwame's shoulder. "I wish I weren't." Kwame clenched his fist. "I need to find her." Boba hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I heard something, Kwame." A few traders from the next village mentioned seeing Nia traveling with a man. They said she was heading toward the river town. Kwame's jaw tightened. He turned and headed straight for his horse. Boba didn't need to ask where he was going. He already knew. The journey to betrayal. Kwame rode through the night, his heart pounding with every gallop. The cool night air did little to calm his raging emotions. He tried to reason with himself, maybe there was an explanation, maybe this was all a misunderstanding. But deep down, he knew the truth. The village by the river was quiet when he arrived. The moon cast eerie shadows on the narrow streets. He asked around, describing Nia, and soon found someone who had seen her. "She is staying at the guest house by the water," an old fisherman told him. "But you will not find her alone." Kwame's heart sank. He urged his horse forward, riding straight to the guest house. The building was small, with flickering lanterns casting dim light against its wooden walls. Kwame dismounted, his hands shaking as he approached. He moved quietly, his steps slow and deliberate. As he reached the window, he peered inside. And there she was. Nia. In Django's arms. The moment of reckoning. The sight of them together was like a dagger to Kwame's chest. They sat close, their laughter filling the air, their fingers intertwined as if they had not a single care in the world. Nia's face, once so distant in their home, was now glowing with happiness. A happiness she had never shown him. Kwame felt his breath hitch. His body tensed, his heart pounding so loudly that he could hear it in his ears. How long had she been doing this? Had she ever truly loved him? Or had he always been nothing more than a source of gold and comfort to her? He stepped back from the window, gripping his hands into fists. He wanted to storm inside, to confront them, to demand an explanation. But deep down, he knew there was no explanation that would undo this betrayal. Suddenly, as if sensing something, Nia turned her head towards the window. Their eyes met. For the first time, Kwame saw fear in Nia's gaze. She scrambled to her feet, her face pale. Django turned, confusion flashing across his features as he followed her gaze and saw Kwame standing outside. Kwame didn't move. He simply stood there, his presence alone more powerful than any words he could speak. Nia took a hesitant step forward, as if she wanted to explain, but she knew there was nothing to say. The truth had already been exposed. Without a word, Kwame turned and walked away. Nia called out to him, her voice shaky, but he didn't stop. He mounted his horse and rode off into the night, leaving behind the woman he had once loved and the life he had once known. A ride into darkness. Kwame's vision blurred with tears as he rode through the darkened roads. His hands clenched the reins so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The betrayal replayed in his mind over and over, the laughter, the touches, the way she had looked at Django with the love she had never given him. His heart burned with pain, but more than that, it burned with anger. How could he have been so blind? How could he have let this happen? The wind howled around him as he rode faster, his emotions clouding his judgment. He didn't see the cart coming. He didn't see the massive truck loaded with timber barreling down the road. By the time he noticed, it was too late. The world spun. The impact was deafening. Then everything went black darkness. Silence. A void without time or memory. Kwame drifted in unconsciousness, lost between life and death. Flashes of light, distant voices, the feeling of floating, it was all a blur. Then, pain. A deep, throbbing pain spread through his body like fire, pulling him back from the abyss. His eyes fluttered open. The room was white, the ceiling unfamiliar. The smell of herbs and medicine filled the air. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his ribs, forcing him back down. Easy, a gentle voice said. A woman was sitting beside him, her face warm with concern. She had dark skin, high cheekbones, and eyes filled with kindness. Her name tag read Zola, and she wore the robes of a healer. Kwame blinked, his throat dry. Where am I? You are in the village clinic, Zola said softly. You were in an accident. You've been unconscious for 3 days. Kwame frowned, his mind racing. An accident. 3 days. He struggled to remember, but his thoughts were tangled, like a puzzle missing its pieces. 3 days. His voice was hoarse. Zola nodded. You were found on the road, badly injured. A merchant's cart ate your horse. You were lucky to survive. Kwame swallowed hard. Who am I? Zola's expression shifted from concern to shock. You don't remember. Kwame's chest tightened. Panic crawled up his spine. He tried to recall something, his name, his home, his past, but all that greeted him was emptiness. He hesitated. I don't know. Zola sighed, placing a reassuring hand on his. You must have hit your head very hard. Your memory may return in time. Until then, you must rest. Kwame clenched his jaw. No memory. No past. He was a stranger to himself. But something inside him whispered that he had lost more than just his name. The wife he couldn't remember. Word of Kwame's accident spread quickly through the village. And soon, Nia arrived. She rushed into the clinic, her silk dress flowing behind her, a perfect mask of worry on her face. Oh, my love, she gasped, rushing to his side. I was so worried about you. Kwame blinked, staring at her blankly. She was beautiful, no doubt, but something about her seemed off. Zola watched the scene carefully, sensing something strange. Nia reached for his hand, her grip possessive. I am your wife, Nia. We have been married for years. Kwame's heart pounded. His wife. He searched his mind for a memory, anything, but there was nothing. Just a vast emptiness where his past should be. Nia smiled sweetly. You don't have to worry. I will take care of you, my love. I will remind you of everything. But Zola noticed something odd. Nia's words were affectionate, but there was something cold in her eyes. A flicker of calculation, a hint of relief. She wasn't heartbroken. She was hiding something. A life of lies. Nia wasted no time in bringing Kwame home. She filled his ears with stories, how they met, how much they loved each other, how he had promised her the world. Kwame listened, but something inside him didn't feel right. His home was grand, filled with riches. But it didn't feel like his. He watched Nia move through the house, her eyes constantly shifting, as if she were hiding something. And then there were the servants. They were polite, but when they looked at him, their gazes were strange. Pitying. Concerned. One evening, as he walked through the house, he overheard whispers. He doesn't remember, does she think this will last forever? She's lucky. If he knew the truth. Kwame's chest tightened. What truth? And then there was Zola. Despite Nia's insistence that he stay home, Zola continued to check on him. How do you feel? She asked one day as they sat outside in the garden. Empty, Kwame admitted. I should feel something. Anything. But all I have is her word. And yet, it doesn't feel real. Zola hesitated before speaking. Have you ever considered that maybe she's not telling you the whole truth? Kwame turned to her, his breath hitching. What do you mean? Zola lowered her voice. I don't think you forgot your past by accident. I think someone wanted you to forget. Kwame's pulse quickened. Could it be true? Had someone stolen his memories on purpose? The first clue. That night, Kwame lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Something deep inside him told him to search. He rose silently, his bare feet moving across the cold marble floor. He checked drawers, cabinets, everything. But nothing felt like it belonged to him. Then, in the back of a locked wardrobe, he found a small wooden box. Inside was a single piece of cloth, embroidered with the initials JK. A sharp pain shot through his head. His vision blurred, flashes of images surfacing, a name, a voice, the feeling of betrayal. His hands shook as he clutched the fabric. JK. He didn't know who it belonged to. But he knew one thing for certain. Nia was lying to him. Kwame sat in the dim glow of the moonlight, the small embroidered cloth clutched tightly in his trembling hands. JK, these initials meant something, but the memory remained just beyond his grasp, like a shadow disappearing at sunrise. His heart pounded as questions flooded his mind. Who was JK? Why did the sight of these letters trigger such a sharp pain in his head? He needed answers. And he knew exactly where to start. The confrontation. The next morning, Kwame sat at the grand dining table, his appetite gone. Nia sat across from him, elegantly dressed in a flowing silk gown, pretending to be the concerned, loving wife. My love, are you feeling better today? She asked sweetly. Kwame placed the embroidered cloth on the table between them. Nia's smile faltered. What is this? He asked, his voice steady. Nia hesitated for only a second before picking it up, feigning confusion. I don't know. Where did you find this? Kwame narrowed his eyes. In the back of the wardrobe. Locked away. Nia's hands trembled slightly, but she quickly composed herself. Oh, my love, it must be something from before your accident. Maybe a friend's gift. A sharp pain stabbed Kwame's temples again, flashes of forgotten moments flickering in his mind, the warmth of a fire, a woman's laughter, whispered promises in the dark. A voice, his own, echoed in his head. She loves another. Kwame's breathing became ragged. The truth was fighting its way back. An unexpected ally. That afternoon, as Kwame wandered through the village, he found himself drawn to the clinic. He needed clarity, and there was only one person he could trust. Zola. The moment she saw him walk through the door, she knew something had changed. You remember something, don't you? She asked gently. Kwame nodded, rubbing his temple. Not everything. But I know Nia is hiding something. And I need to find out what. Zola studied him for a moment before taking a deep breath. Then there's something you should know, Kwame. Before your accident, Nia was already planning something. She visited an old merchant outside the village, whispering about selling valuables, jewelry, property. I overheard the traders speaking about it when I went to the market. Kwame's chest tightened. Selling valuables. My wealth, he muttered. She's trying to get rid of everything while I'm vulnerable. Zola nodded. She thinks you're blind, Kwame. She thinks you'll never realize. Kwame clenched his fist. The anger inside him grew, but along with it came something stronger, determination. If Nia had stolen his past, he would take back his future. Following the trail. That night, Kwame pretended to be asleep as Nia slipped out of the house. The moment she left, he followed her. Through darkened alleyways and winding streets, he trailed behind her, keeping his distance. She moved swiftly, as if she had done this many times before. She stopped at a small, run-down house on the edge of the village. Kwame's pulse quickened as he recognized the man who opened the door. Django. The name struck him like a lightning bolt. The pain in his head returned, but this time, the memories came flooding back. Django, his former servant. Django, Nia's secret lover. Django, the man who had stolen his wife's heart. Kwame stumbled back into the shadows, his breath ragged. He remembered. The betrayal. The affair. The night he saw them together. And the accident. The truth in the darkness. Kwame pressed himself against the cold stone wall, listening as Nia spoke. My love, everything is almost ready, she whispered to Django. He still doesn't remember everything, but it's only a matter of time. We need to act fast. Django's deep voice was filled with greed. You have the money. Most of it. I sold the rings, some of the jewelry. But we need more. He has land outside the village. I need to forge the documents. Kwame's stomach churned. His own wife was plotting to steal everything he had worked for, and he had been lying next to her in bed, completely unaware. Django smirked. And when the money is gone? What will you do with him then? Nia's voice turned cold. I don't care. He's as good as dead to me. The words pierced Kwame like a dagger. His fist clenched, his mind clear for the first time in weeks. The woman he had loved, the woman he had sacrificed everything for, she saw him as nothing. He had spent his life believing that love could change her. He had been wrong. The return of the lion. Kwame turned and walked away. He had had enough. By the time Nia returned home, she found Kwame waiting for her in the candlelit hall. Her smile faltered when she saw the look in his eyes. Where were you? He asked, his voice dangerously calm. Nia hesitated. I went to visit a friend. Kwame stepped closer. A friend? Or your lover? Nia's breath caught. Kwame, He slammed the embroidered cloth on the table. I remember everything. Silence fell between them, thick with tension. Nia's face paled. For the first time, she had no words. Kwame stared into her eyes, feeling nothing but disgust. You thought I was a fool. You thought I would never wake up. But I see you now, Nia. I see exactly what you are. Nia swallowed hard. I can explain. Kwame raised a hand, cutting her off. No. You've done enough. He turned away from her, his heart pounding. Tomorrow, he would go to the village elders. He would reclaim his land, his wealth, his name. And Nia. She would lose everything. For too long, he had lived in blindness. But now, the lion had awoken. Nia stood frozen, her heart racing as Kwame's words echoed through the silent hall. You thought I was a fool. But I see you now, Nia. She had always known this moment might come, the day her carefully spun web of lies would unravel. But she never thought it would happen so soon. She had been so close to taking everything, to leaving this village behind and starting a new life with Django. Now, everything was crumbling. Her breath hitched as Kwame turned away from her, his posture rigid with rage. He had always been kind, always been patient. But this was a man she no longer recognized, a man hardened by betrayal, awakened by truth. She couldn't let him ruin everything. Not now. A desperate move. Kwame's footsteps echoed through the hall as he made his way toward the door. He needed to set things right, to reclaim his wealth, to expose Nia's treachery before she could steal anything more. But before he could step outside, Nia grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin. Kwame, wait, she pleaded. Please, don't do this. He turned, his expression unreadable. Do what, Nia? Tell the truth. She forced a sob, her eyes glistening with fake tears. I made a mistake. I was lost, confused. But I never stopped loving you. Kwame's jaw tightened. He had spent years believing her lies. Not anymore. I heard everything, Nia, he said, his voice cold. I followed you. I saw you with him. Her breath caught. Kwame stepped closer, lowering his voice. You were going to steal my wealth, betray me, and disappear with Django. You said I was as good as dead to you. The color drained from Nia's face. I should have died that night, shouldn't I? Kwame continued. That would have made things easier for you. Nia's lips parted, but no words came. For the first time, she knew she had lost. Running out of options. Fear clawed at Nia's chest. She had only one option left, escape. She forced herself to stay calm. Kwame, let's talk about this. Please, she begged, her voice soft. I don't want to lose you. Kwame stared into her. You lost me a long time ago. And with that, he walked past her, stepping out into the night. Nia's mask of sorrow fell away the moment he disappeared. She had to act fast. She rushed to her room, grabbing a small satchel hidden beneath her bed. Inside were the last of the gold coins she had stolen, a few pieces of jewelry, and forged documents for Kwame's land. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to start over, if she could get to Django in time. She wrapped a dark cloak around herself and slipped out the back door, vanishing into the shadows. The betrayal within the betrayal. By the time Nia reached Django's hideout, her heart was hammering. He would know what to do. They could still escape together. She burst through the door, gasping. Django! We have to go. But the room was empty. The wardrobe doors were flung open, his belongings gone. The bed was stripped bare. Panic swelled in her chest. No, no, no. Then she saw it. A note. With trembling hands, she picked it up and read the words scrawled in messy handwriting. You are nothing but a walking corpse. Prepare for your fate. Her breath hitched. She stumbled back, her mind racing. Django had abandoned her. He had taken what he could and left her behind. And then she saw the second note. A medical report. With shaking fingers, she lifted the paper and read the words written at the top. HIV positive, final stage. The blood drained from Nia's face. Django had been sick. Dying. And she had been with him unaware, unprotected, completely blind to the truth. A sob ripped from her throat. What had she done? She had spent years chasing wealth, betraying the only man who had ever loved her, and now she was the one betrayed. Her entire world had collapsed in a single moment. Then came the sound of approaching footsteps. She spun around, her pulse racing. In the doorway stood 3 men, their faces hidden beneath dark masks. Her breath caught. Who are you? One of the men chuckled darkly. Django sends his regards. And before she could scream, they grabbed her. The cause of her own actions. When Nia awoke, she was tied to a chair in a dark, abandoned building. The scent of damp earth filled her nose. Her wrist ached where the ropes bit into her skin. The masked men stood nearby, counting the valuables they had taken from her. What do you want?" she whispered. One of the men crouched beside her, his voice mocking. "You thought Django loved you. He only wanted your gold. And now, he's gone. But don't worry," he smirked. "We'll take good care of you." Terror clutched Nia's chest. She had lost everything, her wealth, her lover, her future. The walls closed in around her. For the first time in her life, she realized there was no way out. But just when she thought all hope was lost, a loud crash echoed through the air. A final twist of fate. The door burst open, and armed warriors stormed inside. The masked men scattered, but they were quickly subdued. And standing in the doorway, his presence commanding, was Kwame. His gaze locked onto Nia, but there was no anger in his eyes. No love. No pity. Just finality. Nia gasped, tears spilling down her face. Kwame, please. He stepped forward, his expression unreadable. You tried to destroy me, Nia. And now, you have destroyed yourself. She shook her head, sobbing. I was wrong. Kwame raised a hand, silencing her. You were given everything. And you threw it away. The warriors took the remaining thieves into custody. But as for Nia, there was no need. Her punishment had already begun. Because the moment she saw her own reflection in the shattered glass on the floor, she realized the truth. Her beauty had faded. Her body was weak. The life she had built on greed had left her a hollow shell of what she once was. She had become exactly what Django called her. A walking corpse. Nia sat frozen, staring at her own reflection in the shattered glass. The woman staring back at her was unrecognizable. Her once radiant face was pale, her eyes sunken, her beauty drained by the weight of her greed and betrayal. She had spent her life chasing wealth, deceiving, manipulating, and now, she had nothing. Kwame stood over her, his face unreadable. The warriors behind him held the captured thieves, their hands bound with thick ropes. The air was thick with tension, the only sound the distant chirping of insects in the night. Slowly, Nia looked up at Kwame, her lips trembling. Kwame, please, help me. Kwame stared at her, his jaw clenched. Once upon a time, he would have given everything for her. But now, he felt nothing. You made your choices, Nia, he said coldly. And this is where they have led you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I was wrong. Kwame raised a hand, silencing her. Save your words. They mean nothing now. She had lied so many times before. Why would he believe her now? Django's betrayal comes full circle. The warriors secured the remaining thieves, but Kwame remained focused on Nia. I know about Django, he said quietly. Nia's eyes widened. A wave of shame and fear washed over her. He knew. Kwame's voice was steady, but there was an underlying fire in his words. You gave up everything for him. Betrayed me for him. And now he's gone, leaving you with nothing but a curse. Nia clenched her fist. Kwame's gaze was sharp. He left you to die, Nia. Just like you were willing to let me die. Her lips trembled. It was true. Django had played her just as she had played Kwame. She had thought she was the one in control, but in the end, she was nothing but a pawn in her own game. The final judgment. Kwame took a deep breath. His heart was still heavy, but the anger had begun to fade. He turned to the village elders, who had gathered after hearing of the commotion. They would decide Nia's fate. She has stolen from me, Kwame said, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. She has deceived me, broken our vows, and plotted against my life. The elders murmured among themselves. In their eyes, Nia was already condemned not by their judgment, but by her own actions. Elder Ofori, the wisest among them, stepped forward. His gaze rested on Nia with deep disappointment. Greed and betrayal have led you to ruin, Nia. Your punishment is not ours to give, it has already been written in your own deeds. Nia's breath hitched. Please. I can change. Elder Ofori shook his head. You had the chance. And you threw it away. The decision was made. Nia would be banished from the village. No home. No wealth. No love. She had spent her life betraying those who cared for her, and now she would walk the world alone. A new beginning for Kwame. As Nia was led away, her sobs echoing into the night, Kwame turned away, feeling a weight lift from his chest. For too long, he had lived in blindness, believing love could change someone who had no heart. But now, he was free. And he knew exactly where he needed to be. The next morning, he went to find Zola. She had always been there, helping him, believing in him. Not for his wealth, not for his status, but because she saw the man he truly was. When she opened the door, her eyes filled with warmth. Kwame smiled, for the first time in what felt like forever. "Zola," he said. "I remember everything now. And I remember you, and the kindness you've shown me when I had nothing." Zola studied his face carefully. "And what will you do now?" Kwame took a deep breath. "Start again." Zola smiled. "Then let's do it together." And for the first time, Kwame knew what it felt like to truly be loved. The sun rose over the village, casting a golden glow over the land. The air was fresh, filled with the sounds of life, a stark contrast to the darkness that had clouded Kwame's heart for so long. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, he was free. Nia was gone. Her cries still echoed in his ears, but Kwame felt no guilt. She had carved her own path, and now she had to walk it alone. Her greed had led to her downfall. But Kwame had been given a second chance. And he wasn't going to waste it. The fall of Django. As Kwame sat outside his home, a messenger approached him, breathless. "Django has been caught." Kwame's eyes narrowed. "Where?" "In a nearby village. He was trying to flee with stolen gold, but the guards recognized him." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Kwame's face. Django had thought he could escape justice. But fate had other plans. The next day, Kwame traveled to the elders' court, where Django was held in chains. His once proud face was now haggard, his eyes darting around in fear. The elders had already decided his fate, exile. But as Kwame stood before him, he saw no remorse in Django's eyes. "You stole from me," Kwame said calmly. "You used Nia, just like she used me. And now, you have nothing." Django sneered. "I may have lost, but at least I lived free. Can you say the same?" Kwame let out a slow breath. "Yes. Because freedom is not about wealth or deception. It's about peace." Django laughed bitterly, but Kwame no longer cared. He turned and walked away, leaving Django to his fate. A fate he had sealed for himself. A love that was true. With the ghost of his past finally laid to rest, Kwame focused on his future. And there was only one person he wanted by his side, Zola. She had been his light in the darkness. She had never asked for his wealth. Never sought to gain anything from him. She had simply cared. And now, he realized how precious that was. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Kwame took Zola's hands in his. "I've spent my life believing that love meant giving and giving until I had nothing left," he said softly. "But now I see that love isn't about what you give. It's about what you share." Zola smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "And what do you want to share, Kwame?" He took a deep breath. This was not the desperation he had once felt with Nia. This was something real. Something pure. "Everything," he said. Zola's smile widened. "Then let's build something together." And so, they did. A new chapter. Kwame and Zola built a life that was not founded on greed, lies, or betrayal, but on trust, respect, and love. Kwame restored his family's land, not for wealth, but for the village, so that others could benefit from it. He no longer saw riches as the measure of a man's worth. And Zola, with her kindness and wisdom, stood by his side, guiding him toward a future far brighter than he had ever imagined. As for Nia, no one ever heard from her again. Some said she wandered the lands, searching for a way to regain what she had lost. Others said she was cursed to forever roam as a walking corpse, haunted by the ghost of her own greed. But Kwame no longer cared. He had everything he needed. A heart that was finally at peace. A love that was true. And a future that was his to shape. This story teaches us that greed, betrayal, and deceit will always lead to destruction. Nia had everything, yet she wanted more. She sacrificed true love for temporary wealth, and in the end, she lost it all. Django thought he could build a life on manipulation and selfishness. But fate caught up with him. And Kwame. He learned that real love is not about what you can take, but about what you can build together. True wealth is not in gold, but in the peace of a pure heart.